All right. Well, welcome back. Those of you that were on last week, and those of you that are new this week. As a reminder, I am recording these and I do post them onto my YouTube channel, just because it's just easiest to disseminate it that way. And so if you weren't here last week, or if you need a review of last week, just please go to that area there, or go to not that area go to YouTube and rewatch that. And you could also look at previous semesters reviews if you need to. It's pretty much the same review, so if you want to get ahead, I'm trying to go through this practice set and trying to do it blankly, but and there is PDF versions that are not written all over. That way you can use those. The only thing that you might notice on some of these written Word document is that I've updated or changed some of the questions, which means that the key in the Word document is probably going to be wrong because I've changed some of the variables, but I try and make sure it's written in the context of the test, or the written in red ink or red pen, whatever. Additionally, I did make a new playlist on YouTube that's specific for you guys. It's 23 fall nursing, or 23 fall Allegheny campus nursing 110. So you'll see that listed there. And that'll be the most up-to-date version. So just to kind of give you a heads up on where those are. All right. So I don't want to spend too much time talking about semantic type things. I want to get into kind of reviewing some of the stuff you're going to see. Last time we discussed briefly some of the things like doing conversions. You need to know how to do household to metric, usually is the most common route, and you need to know how to do metric to metric conversions. So if you go to and you're reviewing your blueprint, which I have a copy of in the dosage calc folder, just review the different types of questions that are listed there, or follow the mock test, because the mock test is very similar to what you're going to see on your actual test. Now, do any of you know, are you taking a paper test or are you taking a Blackboard test?
I
am not sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like the consensus is you're not sure. And I just want you to know, I do not know either. So if anyone does find out, please email me. I will try and reach out to Professor Walters, and I will ask what she plans to do. Okay. So I want to get into now some of the different types of medications and labels you're going to see. I'm going to skip around a little bit because there's a order that I prefer to do these in that I haven't like changed. Don't worry, I'm going to put this writing back on, but some of you are like, God, get rid of it. All right. So the first thing that after you do some of your medication or your basic unit conversions, you're going to do what are called oral-based meds, right? So these are medications that will be given by mouth, and I'm going to give you a couple examples of that here in just a second. Benefit of the PDF is that all these things are already removed and deleted, so you don't have to worry about all those writings. So, all right. So for this example, we have a patient is ordered to receive 500 milligrams. We're going to assume of this cephalexin, okay, by mouth PID, BID. I'm sorry. And so a couple things we need to pay attention to when we're answering a question like this. So first of all, nursing students usually do really, really well with these types of questions because you have some familiarity with it, meaning you've probably taken Tylenol, given Tylenol, or, if you have kids, you've, given them like an oral suspension. You've done some of these things before, either over the counter or by prescription, or if you take supplements, all those things, you have some familiarity with these things. Now, what we're going to ask you, though, is to kind of pay attention to some things because, you might see on like ATI or NCLEX, they might try and trick you by making sure you're paying attention to different things like what's ordered, what the order is calling for, is it the right medication? Those are all things that are going to be really, really important when it comes to doing your med-based calculations. So first and foremost, we always want to pay attention to what we're being ordered. So this one says your patient receives. You can say the patient was ordered, that the doctor ordered, and we're looking at a couple things. We want to know the strength of being ordered, how it's being administered, and then how many times per day it's being administered. And that's usually the common route. When you see this PO, that means per oral. Per oral means by mouth. Okay. So we're not going to shove capsules up their bum, in their ear, up their nose. It's going in their mouth. BID is a shorthand that means twice a day. Okay. So I can just write twice a day. Another way that you might see this written is Q12H. It's supposed to be a 12, which means every 12 hours. Okay. A lot of times if you've ever had a script from the pharmacy, it's written in, it's written in patient language, not doctorese, right? Or nurse-ese. It's written so that there is no ambiguity on how much to administer. You're going to be introduced, if you haven't been introduced already, to basically converting these shorthands into what they're supposed to be. So some examples of like different things might be TID, which means 3 times a day, or QID, which means 4 times a day. But there's also, you might see QD, like just Q and D. There's no I in between, which just means daily. You might see PRN, which stands for basically as needed, right? You might see PRN Q2H, so as needed every 2 hours, which means it might be something you don't need to take every 2 hours, but if you are going to take it, wait 2 hours between doses, okay? The other thing you always want to pay attention to is it'll ask you how many capsules to administer. Sometimes it'll say how many capsules to administer per day. Sometimes it'll just say how many capsules. You'll give blank capsules. And if it says just blank, it just says capsules, it doesn't say per day, then what that means is per dose. Okay. So you can assume that it means per dose. Per day, they're going to ask you and be specific. If it's per dose, that's the default. Okay. So let's do this question and let's answer it. I'm going to show you dimensional analysis just because that's my default for explaining, but then I'll also do ordered over available. And I like to spend a little bit of time on these easy ones because you probably already know the answer. Like you're sitting there going like, okay, 2 twice a day, 4. And that's perfect. That's exactly what I do. If you're like, do we have to do anything? Not really. I mean, you can answer that, but if you ever miss a question like this, a lot of times you missed it because you calculated per dose when they asked for per day, or you calculated per day when they asked for per dose. So let's do this, and let's do this the 2 different ways. Plus, it's always good practice when you're setting up a math problem if you already know what it looks like and how it's solved. So that way you can do it when it gets to harder problems. You'll at least have a strategy to answer those questions. So the order is 500 milligrams. It's my preference that I start with the 500 milligrams. I'm going to convert milligrams to what I'm looking for. Now, I forgot to go through and talk about the label, so I'm going to do that real quick. When we look at our drug label, we're going to look to see what the medication is. Cephalexin, it's an antibiotic. We're going to look to see how is it administered. It's administered in capsules. And what we're really looking for is what is the strength of the cephalexin capsules. And so this 250 milligrams means 250 milligrams per capsule. A lot of students will see this 100 capsules and want to do something with that. That just tells you how many capsules are available in an unopened container of cephalexin. Okay. So patients don't usually receive that. They would just receive like that orange, transparent bottle with their medication in it. They open it up and then they take out what's in there. So there might be, only a 30-day supply in there or a 10-day supply if we're talking about antibiotic, whatever the case may be. You're not going to have 100, just hanging out there. Okay. Because nobody should be taking that many medications. That goes to the pharmacy. So we know it's 250 milligrams, and my equivalent is 1 capsule, and I'm just going to abbreviate that cap. Okay. I'm going to do some math, plug this into my calculator, or just do it in my head. 2 capsules. Now that's 2 capsules per dose. Now you don't need to write the you don't need to write per dose or per day or anything like that. That was more so just to tell you like where that 2 capsules is coming from. Then it's just a matter of, okay, if it's BID, then I'm just going to say 2 times 2 is 4 capsules per day. So my answer would be 4. How can this question be asked differently? Well, obviously we can use a different medication, different label. The strength might be different, right? So that might be 750. It might be 125. It shouldn't be 125, but it might be 750. It might be some other thing. This BID could be QD, QID, TID. It can be any number of numbers as far as how many times per day to administer. And then it could be per day, or it could be per dose. All right, let's see here. Okay, cool. Yeah. Yeah, so you always want to answer based off of what the question is asking for. So, like, yeah, I think you said, like, there's a practice test question, and it just says you will give blank capsules. And so the answer for that question would be 2. But if it says how many capsules per day for this same question, it would be 4. So is it per day or per dose? All right. Oh, so that's one type of oral-based medication is capsules, tablets. The label tells you what the units are, and think about it as in the terms of, if you were the patient, what are you telling them to do? Swallow these tablets, swallow these capsules, or do you want them to swallow a liquid? Let's look at a liquid example. So question number 6 is the equivalent, or is a oral-based medication that is looking at the question, and it even tells you here how many teaspoons would you administer. So that's something to pay attention to. But sometimes it'll just tell you how many milliliters will you give. So let's look at 2 of those scenarios. So I'm going to treat this question exactly like I did for the cephalexin question. Okay. I'm going to look to see what my order is. So it says 250 milligrams, Dilantin. So it's the same medication. So we're good there. Dilantin by mouth. And the other thing is, we don't know, like, if you're just reading the text, you may not know that this is an oral suspension until you see, oh, it's a suspension. So you see that listed there. When you see that listed there, that it's an oral suspension, you at least know that you're going to be drinking it. And if you're drinking it, it's going to be in milliliters. Okay. Or if they ask you to solve it in teaspoons or tablespoons or something like that, you'll have that as available to you as well. So just like the cephalexin question, the next thing I want to know is what is my conversion factor? What is my concentration? What is my available? And I realized in the previous question, I didn't do ordered over available, but I will do it for this one. So the next thing I'm going to look for is this right here, where it says 125 milligrams per 5 ml. That is your available, okay, and your quantity, okay? So the quantity is, like in the cephalexin question, your quantity was 250 milligrams per capsule. So every capsule was 250 milligrams. So your quantity was 1 capsule. For this dilantin question, your quantity is 5 milliliters. So for every 5 milliliters, they're going to receive 125 milligrams of this medication. So let's answer the question. There's 2 ways to do this. And also, I will tell you the most common reason this question gets missed on the test is because you solved for milliliters when they were asking for teaspoons, or you solve for teaspoons when they're asking for milliliters. So just make sure you're reading the question, because you're going to see a lot of these labels are reused, but the questions are asked a little bit differently, okay? Sometimes they get tricky and they'll say, how many times per day do you administer this? And you're like, there's no math to do. You would just say 1, because it doesn't tell me any other times, okay? All right, so Dilan, my order is 250 milligrams. What do I have available? I actually have 125 milligrams available. Here's where most students go wrong, is that they forget that when they're doing ordered over have or desired over have, they forget to incorporate the quantity. And then this one, it's 5 milliliters. Don't be that student that makes that mistake of putting in the wrong quantity. Sometimes you're going to get answers right just doing ordered over have, because the quantity is 1, right? 1 milliliter. So like if this was 250 over 125 per 1 ml, then you would just say, oh, okay, the answer is 2, and then you'd be done. But that's not what it's saying. If that would be true if it was 1 milliliter per 125 milligrams, and I'll show you an example of that later on. It's 5 milliliters is your quantity. So just make sure you're paying attention to the milliliters that is available there before you answer your question. All right. So I can multiply across the top, divide by the bottom, and I'm going to get an answer of 10 milliliters. If you leave that as your answer, you will get it marked wrong because they didn't ask you for milliliters. They asked you for teaspoons. So you have to do one extra step here. Convert milliliters to teaspoons. If you don't remember this, 1 teaspoon is equal to 5 milliliters. So your answer is going to be 2 teaspoons. As a shorthand, if you happen to get this question, you can just right off the bat, if you already know that 1 teaspoon is equal to 5 milliliters, well, then you can just use that information and incorporate into your sentence here, or into your available. And so another way that I would write this problem to save a step is I do my order 250 milligrams over my available 125 milligrams times my quantity. This time I'm going to say 1 teaspoon. And then I would get 2 teaspoons. So what I just showed you there is I call those shortcuts if you're paying attention. But if you're if you're not ready for shortcuts, you can still get to the same answer. Just it takes you one extra step. It's not a big deal.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Just going off of what you just said. So like, you know how in, your math classes, you have to show your work Is that the same with this, or as long as we get to the right answer? Because like for this problem, I knew from, just from looking at the conversion from the top 250 and 125, that was going to be two teaspoons. So do I have to like write everything out? Or if I just come up with that answer of 2 teaspoons, would that be sufficient?
So first of all, good question. And the short answer is I don't know, but I've been told that they do want you to show your work.
Okay.
But I don't know to what extent that means and for which types of questions. I would just say write something down. They
Okay.
want to make sure that you're not I don't know, memorizing it. I'm not entirely sure what they're trying to do because I mean obviously I take it for granted that I've been doing this now for um like close to 15 years looking at these types of problems. And so I can do most of these in my head.
Right.
And even if they're longer questions, just because I know the sequence of how to do them. And so I wouldn't necessarily have to show my work, but it's still a good idea because they want to make sure, like I said, that you're not cheating. Not that anyone's necessarily thinking you are. Um, just, yeah, I would write something down or at least write down some variables. They'll probably have you write down on like scratch paper. If it's a Blackboard test, then you don't have to worry about showing your work unless they're collecting your paper. So the short answer, like I said, is I don't know. And I don't know. And even if they do say to show your work, I just don't know to what extent they want you to show your work.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. I don't have a better answer for you.
No, you're fine. Thank you.
You're welcome. I would say that for the most part, most students are not getting marked off because they didn't show their work. They're getting marked off because they made a mistake. And then the benefit of showing your work is like if you have to remediate, then they show you your test and then I can go over it with you. And then I can be like, oh, well, here's where you made your mistake.
Okay.
Or when you're reviewing it yourself, you can see, oh, I flipped these two variables and
Right.
or I forgot, oh, it was supposed to be teaspoons and I left it in milliliters. That's the benefit of writing it down. So
Okay.
just yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Good question. All right, let's see here. So here's another oral based medication. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change a variable. I'm going to change the question a little bit. That way you're not marking all these different things. So anytime you see a cup or a picture of syringe or this thing like down here, like a Tubex, make sure you're marking those things. Okay. Because it'll even tell you like circle the correct amount. Or if it's on Blackboard, it'll ask you just to place a marker on it. This is another area where students mess or get things wrong. And it's because you end up putting your answer, you end up putting it in the or you forget to mark the cup and then they'll mark it wrong. So you got the math right, but then you forgot to do the procedural thing. So I'm going to change this up. Let me just see something real quick. Yeah, I think I'm going to do student 10. This should work out still. All right, so I'm going to change this question to 10 milliequivalents PO QID with juice. The available is potassium chloride in it's 20 milliequivalents. So milliequivalents, don't get hung up on that. It's just the unit that it's available in. So it's just like milligrams or micrograms per 15 ml. And then we want to know how many milliliters per dose. So take a moment, try and answer this question and tell me how many milliliters per dose. Obviously, you can't mark the syringe, but tell me how many milliliters you get per dose. Just type it into the chat once you get an answer. And if you're just don't know, just that's a good answer too. Just say, I don't know. Or I mean, type in, I don't know. Oh yeah, I should add that just because I'm getting messages, like you can send it as a direct message if you are hesitant to share your answer. Even if you get it wrong, I'm not going to call you out and be like, "Oh, you don't get this." Like that's why you're here, is to learn these things. So if you're going to be wrong here. And then if you don't want to publicly display your answer, you can always send it as a direct message, not a problem. But if you share it with everybody, everyone benefits, because sometimes, somebody's going to put in an answer that you got and it's the wrong answer, and then we can kind of figure out what that is. So it looks like everyone that's putting down an answer, it's the same answer I got, which is the 7.5 milliliters. So first of all, I want to give you a little shortcut cheat to understand that your answer is going to be on the cup, because you can't estimate. So when you get this question, just know that your answer will be on the cup. Okay. So there's a finite number of ways that this potassium chloride question can be asked. And you're gonna get a question that's either going to be your answer is either going to be 2.5 up to 30 milliliters, depending on what the order is. So if I'm doing this, and let's say I'm doing the ordered or desired over have, my order is 10 milliequivalents. Sorry, that's supposed to be a Q. Over my available, which is 20 milliequivalents, better Q, times my available. Like I said, this is the one, or times my quantity. This is the part that a lot of students will forget to do. None of you did, but this is the part that a lot of students will forget to do. Then you do 10 times 15, which is 150, divided by 20, and you're going to get 7.5 milliliters. Then you would just mark your cup. So that might just mean marking it like this. It might mean, drawing a line across, but I think circling it is usually fine, because it says circle the amount on the cup. Try not to make like a big circle. So not be like, oh, it's 20, like what is your answer there? So just make sure you are circling the correct amount, and that it's obvious that you're circling that amount. The other thing is, it doesn't tell you anything, but if they asked you per day, you might write something else. I imagine if they really wanted to get fancy with this question, they can say, how much would you administer per dose, mark it on the cup, and then how much would you give per day? So you could ask two questions basically in one. Have you mark the cup for the individual dose, and then calculate, 7.5 times 4 for the total. So go ahead, Tiffany.
Sorry, I'm that guy.
That's all right. Please be.
But so like the one that I did on Blackboard, it's not necessary, like on the paper, it's, circle it or mark it. But on Blackboard, they have like this little star looking thing, and you have to like place it of where you would be marking. So my question is, do you have to put it on like the hash mark or the actual number? Like
So
where is an ideal place to place it, if that makes sense?
it does. So just so you know, because I can see the back end.
Mm-hmm.
Like let's say the answer was 15 milliliters.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have this big bar going across. So as long as you drop your point anywhere in the vicinity of the bar, you'll get
Okay.
that answer correct.
Okay.
So I always say, like, put it right on the the number, and
Mm-hmm.
that would probably be your best bet.
Okay.
Yep. All right. Let's look at another example. All right. Yeah, let's do one more. Now, this type of I knew that was going to happen. This type of medication is an injectable. So this would be considered like your SC, your IM, your subcutaneous intramuscular type of injection. First of all, it tells you it's an injection, right? The other thing it tells you is you'll see this SC or you'll see IM. SC stands for subcutaneous. IM stands for intramuscular. No matter what it is, math-wise, it's the same. You're calculating and looking for how many milliliters to administer. So when I look at this the same way I look at an oral suspension. I just want to know how many milliliters to administer. And then I want to, sometimes it's going to ask you to mark your syringe or mark your Tubex. And then we're going to talk about that here in just a second. Now, let's say this was, instead of 3,000, let's say it was 7,000. So I want you to apply the same principles that we've been covering so far and tell me what you would put as an answer. And like I said, just type it in, either direct message or type it into everybody. What would you administer milliliters for this patient given this injection of heparin? Perfect. Okay, good. Yeah, so it looks like everyone's starting to get there and you're getting the right answer. You're writing that correctly. So if you got, or if you're still working towards getting 0.7, that's the same thing I got. Okay. So what's my order? My order is 7,000 units subcutaneously. And I want to compare that to my available, which is 10,000 units per milliliter. Okay. And I'm getting that right from my label, right? Now, heparin, you wouldn't want to inject intramuscular because I imagine that would create bruising in the muscle, and that's not where it does its action. That's why it's subcutaneous or IV intravenous. All right, so 7,000 units, and then obviously I switched back to dimensional analysis. Okay, units cancel out. If you ever sitting there looking at this like, oh, I don't want to make a mistake with all these zeros in your calculator, and nobody did, I'm going to look. So there's 3 zeros here and 4 zeros here. I'm going to cross out those 3 zeros, and then I'm going to cross out the same number of zeros here. So 7 divided by 10 is going to give me, I'm less likely to make that mistake on my calculator, and I'm going to get to the same answer, 0.7 milliliters. If what I just showed you, you're like, no, I don't want to do that. You don't have to do that. I'm just using that as an example. All right. The next thing is, remember, you'll miss these if you don't put in your information on your Tubex. So you want to make sure you circle the correct amount on your Tubex. So we have to look at this and realize half a milliliter is the same thing as 0.5. And then what I want to make sure is, are these in units of 0.1 or 0.2? And so I'm going to count. So this is 0.5, this is 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, 1.0. Okay, so 5, 6, 7. This would be my answer right here. You may even want to add, 0.7. That way they know that you tagged the right thing. Last semester, or I'm sorry, not last semester, earlier this semester, a lot of the second semester students missed some of these questions. The main reason they missed it is because they answered the Tubex question they put the answer down for whatever the practice test was. So make sure you're putting down whatever's on your, whatever's in front of you. Don't get so hyper focused on, oh, I saw this question, I know this 2x question, and then it was 0.4 on the test. It's point. They're going to be different numbers. Okay. Sometimes they'll be the same just because there's only a finite number of numbers that we can use, but they're most likely going to be different numbers. So use the numbers that are on your test, please. All right. I'm going to go through and find a couple other examples. Here, actually, let's talk about sliding scale for a second. So what sliding scale is just basically you have a patient who's a diabetic, or at least who is monitoring their sugar levels, and they are being evaluated in their clinically, like they're getting periodic blood testing, or they're wearing like a continuous glucose monitor or something like that. And what you want to pay attention to is basically what the value is. So here it says patient's blood glucose level is 275. So I'm going to underline that. 275 is the patient's blood glucose level. And then you're going to look at the glucose reading, and you're going to see where that 275 kind of fits in. It's going to fit in right here. And then what am I going to do? I'm going to administer 4 units. So you probably want to even write give 4 units. Okay. So what should you do? Give 4 units. You can even say 4 units of what? 4 units, regular insulin. That way, there's no question that you know what you're giving them. The sliding scale just means every time you check it, then you adjust how much insulin you're giving to them. And these are patients that are usually are kind of like all over the place with their insulin, which is why they're being closely monitored and why you're using a sliding scale. If you're like at home, you're not necessarily following a sliding scale. Like if you have somebody who's like being treated for gestational diabetes, or they're insulin dependent diabetic, a lot of times they're going to follow like a protocol that is less about a sliding scale and more about basically reporting their numbers, getting feedback from their doctor, and however that's being managed. And then if you have somebody who's like has a an insulin port, that a lot of nowadays those things just have their own, they do their own calculations. They just had to make sure that there's insulin in the machine. So that's sliding scale. Another one I want to go over real quick is this one that is much debated and commonly missed, and I'll show you why it's missed in just a second. I'm going to change all the values here in just a second so I can show you how we do this here. So I'm going to change my units here. So let's say for regular insulin, I'm going to do 22, and then I'm going to do 30 for the NPH. All right. So when we do this this question here, the thing that frustrates a lot of students, frustrates me, is like looking at and realizing that what this question is asking for, and then also realizing and trying to figure out how to kind of appropriately mark the syringe. So if the next time you go to the dosage calc folder, there's a in the top level folder, it says like mixing insulin. There's a picture. It shows you it came right from a textbook. I kind of copied and pasted it in because I wanted to be able to show you that there's a resource and a reference for that, and that is why I'm going to mark the syringe in a moment the way I'm going to mark it. If you are taking a Blackboard test, a lot of times they just ask you to mark the syringe at the total level because you can't put 2 drop points on there and then get a grading for that, a grade for that. So if you see this question on Blackboard, you're going to see it just marking, you know, the total number. All right. So looking at this question, it tells me a couple things. It says the patient is to receive 22 units of regular insulin and then 30 units of U100 NPH. Okay, so there are two different insulin types. If you've looked at insulin or studied insulin, you know that there's a clear insulin and there's a cloudy insulin. The clear insulin is your regular insulin. So you've heard the you know, the mnemonic clear before cloudy. I think it's just fine. Just you would draw regular first. So you're always drawing regular first and then the other type second. So clear before cloudy is fine, but just regular first is the best way to remember it. So when it says which solution and amount will be drawn up first, which solution would be 22 units of regular. So 22 units regular. I'm just going to abbreviate that R. The next thing it says is to choose a syringe, A or B, and then mark the syringe to indicate the correct total medication level. So this question is being asked a little bit differently, and I'll show you where there's some nuance because you might see different ways that this question is asked. So first of all, remember, I think it was you guys. No, this was the Boyce campus that I was mentioning this, but insulin is always going to be measured in units. We don't need to convert units of insulin to milliliters of insulin. Okay, so knowing that, we're going to use the syringe that's measuring in units. Okay, so this is the syringe we're going to choose is B, because it's the only syringe of the two listed that is that shows me units. Okay, the other thing is, you know, if my lowest number is 22 and the highest this goes up to is 16, this is not what we want to use. So we don't want to use A. Don't even look at it. Okay. So it says select the syringe that we're going to use. We're going to use B because it's in units, and then we're going to indicate the total, the correct total medication level. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to add the two medications or the two insulin types. 22 plus 30 is 52. Now, one of the things you have to pay attention to, and this is what I tried to demonstrate on the TubeX question, you want to make sure you know, are these in increments of 1 or are they in increments of 2? Meaning, what's the difference between 20 and 30? If I think it's 1, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, nope, that's not right. It's in increments of 2, most likely. 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30. Okay. Because a lot of times students will unfortunately make the thing and they'll say like, oh, it's 52. I'm going to put my mark here. Okay. But that's not 52. That's 54. So I would want to clear that out. I want to make sure I'm making that correct marking at the 52, which is going to be right here. 52 units total. Now, if it asks you to also mark the syringe for the solution and amount to be drawn up first and the total medication level, so you'll see some practice questions that indicate that. Remember, you're drawing up regular insulin first. In a hypothetical situation, the regular insulin is going to be closest to the plunger side. So the regular insulin is going to be closer to the plunger side, and then the NPH is going to be closer to the needle side. The reason I'm mentioning to that is because in reality, it all mixes together. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. If it asks you to indicate where the first or the regular insulin will be, what they're basically asking you is where that would be in context of if the syringe was filled first with regular and then pushed by the NPH. So given that, most students will try and put a mark at 22. That is not where you want to put your mark. You want to put your mark at 22 or 52, and you want to subtract 22 from that and that happens to be at 30. So what that means is between 30 and 52. So in this range here, between 30 and 52, this is where your regular insulin hypothetically would be because you drew it up first. And then between 0 and 30, this is where my NPH would be. In reality, though, it all gets mixed together. So if you're at like a lab setting and you're practicing this, you're gonna sit there and go like, what all mixes together? There is no separation. Or if you go onto YouTube, you can see like a video of them demonstrating that, and it doesn't mix. Or it does mix. It's not it doesn't not mix. It just mixes all together. So all right, let me just look at this question here. So it says draw clear before cloudy, air and cloudy first, then air and clear, and then reverse. We're told in lab. Yeah. So I always tell students, I'm a chiropractor. I don't do anything with injections. I'm really good with this math aspect stuff. So procedural, I have heard the part where you push air into the stock, but I wouldn't be the one to tell you if that's right or wrong or have opinion on it one way or the other. All I can tell you is like my wife had gestational diabetes, and I watched her like administer. Pretty much was like a click pen, and it was pretty straightforward. There wasn't any kind of, she didn't have to draw from like a vial or anything like that. So they make it pretty simple from a patient standpoint. But I know that you guys have to learn, because you're going to be dealing with a greater stock than obviously what we had it available to us during our pregnancy. So. All right. So I know I ran you over with a lot of content today. Right now at this point, what I'd highly recommend that you do is go to the practice or to the OneDrive folder and start going through and working through the practice problems. If for some reason you can't find the answer to a question or a question set, email me and let me know, and I'll make sure that I get that addressed for you. And then next week, we'll go over a few other questions, including a reconstitution questions. We'll go over the fluid replacement, intake output type questions, and then kind of cover a few more question types. And like I did this time, we'll meet around 3:15 and go to about 4. Like I said, if you have any other questions, just please feel free to email me. I have to go get my kids off the bus, so unfortunately I can't stay. But if you do have any other questions, please email me, and we can talk